If you would, please take your Bibles for a few minutes this evening and turn to Proverbs chapter 8. So I was looking at the close of the year and thinking ahead to the new year. The Lord directed my thoughts to this chapter a few weeks ago and been just chewing on some things here. Wanted to share a few thoughts from this chapter and hopefully encourage our hearts in our own pursuit of wisdom this year. Proverbs 8, a little bit of context as we get into this chapter. You may be familiar with the Proverbs. Perhaps it's a book that you spent time in or spend time in on a monthly basis. Sometimes this is a book that people are encouraged to read a chapter a day, and maybe that's something that you've done in your life, or maybe it's something you're doing currently. But just a quick orientation, a little bit to this book. The first 9 chapters of Proverbs contain some lengthy discourses or lectures, you might think of them that way, on wisdom. And then starting in chapter 10, there's this abrupt shift where we move into more of these short, rapid-fire proverbs. And I think the best example of this is just to highlight the difference here, is to contrast chapter 4 and the beginning of chapter 10. So very quickly, let me just contrast this for us, and then we're going to move back into chapter 8. We'll look at this more closely. But in chapter 4 of Proverbs, we hear a father address his son regarding wisdom and the value of wisdom. And that father gives his own personal testimony of when he was a child. And then he talks about the value of this thing called wisdom. And he lays out the 2 ways of life. And he urges, in the closing verses of the chapter, he urges his son to choose the right path, the straight path. And you finish that chapter, and really you conclude, among other things, that if this young man gets wisdom, his father is really going to rejoice. And you finish that's 27 verses. All right, that's chapter 4. But then you look at chapter 10 and verse 1, and we read these words in verse 1. A wise son brings joy to his father, but a foolish son, heartache to his mother. And the very next verse moves to a whole different proverb. There's perhaps some connection, but it really is a standalone, on its own proverb in verse 2. So verse 1, 16 English words, and the author describes really what we conclude after 27 verses in chapter 4. So that's really a helpful contrast, I think. Chapters 1 through 9, you have these lengthy discourses, longer explanations of wisdom, its value, pressing and encouraging. Chapter 10 and moving on are these short, rapid fire, sometimes connected, sometimes you have a string that are all connected, but very much just kind of rapid fire, short proverbs. And perhaps you've experienced that as you've read through this book before. As we look at chapter 8, it's important to remember that chapter divisions are not inspired. So it's helpful tonight, as we look at this chapter, to look at before and after this chapter. So let me just very quickly give us a running orientation of 7, 8, and 9. It's going to help to kind of pull this together, give us a picture of what's going on here. In Proverbs 7, the author introduces us as the readers to 2 figurative women. All right? And he calls one in verse 4, refers to her as wisdom. He says, say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call understanding your relative. And so we could start off by saying, here's this lady wisdom that's introduced. And then in verse 5, he speaks of this woman he calls the forbidden woman. And chapter 7 paints this sober scene of a young, foolish man being tempted by the forbidden woman, a woman not his wife, and a woman with certainly wrong intentions. This woman appears in the shadows of night, lurking in the shadows and brazenly tempting any foolish enough to wander her way. And the chapter unfolds, the young and experienced man wanders into her snare, and the conclusion is he really lacks wisdom. That's chapter 7. Chapter 8, wisdom is again personified as a woman, and it begins with her calling out. Doesn't wisdom call out? Doesn't understanding make her voice heard? But her position, according to verses 2 through 3, is open and public. There are no shadows, no skulking here. She's open, public, at the crossroads, at the high place, in the town. And her invitation targets anyone who will listen. If you look at verse 4, we see this. People, I call out to you. My cry is to the children of Adam. So far from the allure of the forbidden woman and the base words of that first woman, Lady Wisdom, according to verses 6 and 7, speaks of noble things. Her lips say what's right. Her mouth tells the truth, and wickedness is detestable to her lips. And that chapter, the one who listens to wisdom, listens to her, gains wisdom. So quite the contrast going on in 7 and 8. And then 9 really pulls it all together, encapsulates it by giving kind of a final glimpse, a final look at both of these individuals' personified paths. Chapter 9, we see Lady Wisdom in verses 1 through 12 and Lady Folly in verses 13 through 18. And they both send out their invitations, and the consequences of accepting each are clearly laid out. To accept Lady Wisdom's invite is to choose life. To accept Lady Folly's invite is to choose death. It's written in that stark of language, right? So these two personifications, the author is building this case and really trying to emphasize before he moves into all these, again, rapid-fire proverbs, wisdom for life, boom, 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 boom. He's trying to lay the case, you really want to pay attention to wisdom. And he's doing this with these personifications. And with them, the author provides a timeless analogy that continues to speak to the hearts of men and women, regardless of societal changes or moral movement in our day. Folly is stripped of any possible allure and seen for what it is: a stumbling, skulking creature living off the carcasses of whatever fools are willing enough to sell themselves. Wisdom is promoted as a skilled artisan, capable of crafting beauty and creating life out of misery and darkness. That's the kind of picture we should begin to see form in our minds. It's like the writer of Proverbs just strips away any kind of fake beauty on the one, and he just builds up the true beauty of the other. Tonight, I want to look at Proverbs 8 for a few minutes and be encouraged as we move into the new year, be encouraged to accept the invitation that's extended at the end of this chapter in verses 32 through 36. It starts off with this address, "And now, sons, listen to me." And just a reminder, although he's addressing sons, that invite back in verse 4 was, "People, I'm calling out to you, to the children of Adam." And sons here really is kind of this parallelism back to chapter 7, but also Solomon is addressing his sons, it seems, in chapter 4. It seems to be directing them specifically, but this really does an open invitation to any. So let's look at this invitation first. She says this, "And now, sons, listen to me. Those who keep my ways are happy. Listen to instruction and be wise. Don't ignore it. Anyone who listens to me is happy, watching at my doors every day, waiting by the posts of my doorway. For the one who finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But the one who misses me harms himself. All who hate me love death." And again, you can't paint a more stark contrast right here. Find wisdom, and you find life and favor from Yahweh himself. Miss wisdom, and you harm yourself, loving death. I mean, that, again, he's just bringing in this very stark contrast for us, setting us up. Quite an invitation. But the question I want to ask as we think about that invitation, here's the invitation, and I want to encourage us to accept this invitation going into the new year. We'll come back to this in closing tonight. But as we think about that, a couple questions. Does Lady Wisdom actually possess all that she claims? Can she carry through on this seeming high invitation and promise? Accept me, and you have life and favor from God himself. That's a pretty high offer and a pretty high promise. Well, what I want to do to answer that is survey verses 4 through 31, the center part of this chapter, and just work through this really an overview. We're not going to spend a lot of time, but just walk through this and notice three things. These three things should move us to go, yes, Lady Wisdom can come through on the promises she makes. Worth our investment, worth our accepting her invitation as we go into the new year. Accept the invitation of wisdom. First of all, let's listen to her words. Does she actually possess all that she claims? Let's listen to her words in verses 4 through 9. After this opening invitation in verses 1 through 3, she describes her speech in verses 4 through 9. And I want to notice three things here. First, as we already noticed, her cry goes out to all. Wisdom is not limited to the elite, or the intellectual, or the aged, or the wealthy, or the good-looking. Wisdom is offered freely to all. People, come and listen. I'm talking to you, children of Adam. If you have flesh and blood tonight, this call comes out to you. This is her speech. Unlike the speech of the forbidden woman that targets specific individuals, the weak, the inexperienced, wisdom's call goes out broadly. Come. All right, that's the first thing. Second thing I want to notice is in verse 5, her speech is direct. We could say it this way: she calls a spade and doesn't waste her words. She calls you and I what we are, inexperienced and foolish. And she tells us simply the solution: learn to be shrewd, develop common sense. I don't know if you've ever had a friend who's spoken that directly to you. Sometimes that can be a hard thing, but it is a really good thing. When someone comes along and just tells you right down the line, here's what's going on, this is what you need to know, here's what's going on with you, with inside you, what I'm seeing, and here's what you should do. This is the speech of Lady Wisdom. It's direct. But then third, notice that her speech is wholesome. Even as she's direct with her speech, look at the description in verses 6 through 9. Let me just run through these phrases. I speak of noble things. What my lips say is right. My mouth tells the truth. Wickedness is detestable to my lips. All the words from my mouth are righteous. None of them are deceptive or perverse. All of them are clear to the perceptive. All of them are right to those who discover knowledge. You just listen to what she's describing. Here's what you're going to find when you listen to me and I talk to you. Here's what you're going to find. The quality and the content of my words will be like this. I don't know, again, if the Lord has blessed you with friends in life who are willing to speak directly and with clarity and with wholesomeness like this, but if you have friends like this, count yourself blessed. Someone who speaks to anyone who will listen with clear, direct language that is also wholesome is someone we should increasingly desire to listen to because there's a benefit in that kind of speech. Think of the contrast, words of flattery that butter you up but have no substance, right? Or words that just kind of deceive and twist and lead you down wrong ways. This kind of language, this kind of speech, does wisdom have what it takes to carry through on an invitation like she offered? Well, listen to her speech. Open invitation to all. She's direct, but it's wholesome. These are good. All right, the second thing, lean on her experience. In verse 10, there's a second invitation, a little briefer in form, but I think it serves something as a pivot in this conversation. We hear this: accept my instruction instead of silver. So there's the language, the speech: accept my instruction instead of silver, and knowledge rather than pure gold. All right, she's holding up this instruction, this speech, what she's going to say. She's holding up knowledge, what she can communicate. She's holding it up and saying, this is more valuable than silver and gold. And there's kind of this pivot moment here where she's going to move into more of this knowledge and understanding and this discretion that she's offering. Not so much concerned with what she's saying now and the quality of her words and her speech, but now she's going to talk about the kinds of things that she's offering and the experience she brings to the table. Let me highlight a few things for us from this section. This is 11 through 21. She brings a value beyond jewels in verse 11. She shares residence with roommates like shrewdness, knowledge, and discretion in verse 12. You say, who does Lady Wisdom hang out with? Shrewdness, knowledge, and discretion. Those are good friends. She possesses hatred of evil on the one hand and good advice and sound wisdom on the other in verses 13 and 14. This was interesting. In verses 15 and 16, she says, she is the one who guides good rulers and judges to make the decisions they make, princes to rule well, judges to do their job well. She says, that's me. I'm there guiding and giving advice and counsel. She loves those who love her, verse 17. And 18 to 21, I'll summarize this way. She offers a rich return on any investment in her. It's the language here in 18 to 21. Just notice this. With me are riches and honor, lasting wealth and righteousness. My fruit is better than solid gold, my harvest than pure silver. I walk in the ways of righteousness, along the paths of justice, giving wealth as an inheritance to those who love me and filling their treasuries. This is not a health and wealth gospel. Okay, this is not a promise that if you get wisdom, you're just going to kind of overflow and just have all kinds of treasure and all kinds of silver and gold, and just kind of the bank account's going to be never ending. Right? That's not the point. She's heaping up all of this wealth, this abundance. And think of it, Solomon's talking about this, and think of all the wealth Solomon enjoyed, everything, the grandeur of all of his own wealth and possessions. And he's describing her this way. Look, you listen to her, and there's a wealth to be had. Maybe we could put it this way. If I told you I had a friend who lived and moved in the circles of authority and power of our country, had a good track record of giving sound advice to those that he interacted with, the kind of advice that people acted on and they had good success from it. And if I told you that this friend would be happy to sit down with you for whatever amount of time you needed and just listen to the things you were working through, trying to deal with, and give you some sound advice, give you some counsel, some direction, and give you a listening ear for a time. Would that be of any interest to us? It would be to me. I think of this with other pastor friends that I have who are years down the road in their ministry, and I have the chance to sit down and pick their brain on things and talk with them, and they come back with some really good, sound wisdom and guidance and direction on things. I value that. Well, here, God comes along in Proverbs 8, and he says, there's this thing called wisdom, and the experience she has is unlike anything else you can find. And she's willing to sit down with you and listen to your problems and bring all of the wealth of her experience to bear on your issues of life and help you work through that. So it begs the question, why would we fail to lean on the experience of God's wisdom? I think certainly one answer to that would be a lack of relationship with the God who supplies such wisdom. If you don't know the God, don't care about the God who supplies this kind of wisdom or expects and desires this kind of wisdom, then why go searching for it? Why get it? What's the value there? But I think for believers, another answer would be that we don't value wisdom like God values it. We don't value it until we've leaned hard on our own understanding and found it to break in the moment of pressure, and perhaps it even stabs us in the hand, and we go, ouch, that hurt. That didn't work. And all of a sudden we realize, you know what? There's this thing called wisdom, God's wisdom, that brings a wealth of experience with it. I should lean on that. So we listen to her words. We lean on her experience. The last thing, verses 22 to 31. Look at her age. Now, I was taught to never ask a woman her age. But we don't have to ask Lady Wisdom her age here. She freely tells us. I just want to note here, verses 22 to 31, let's look at her describe her origin. The Lord acquired me at the beginning of his creation before his works of long ago. I was formed before ancient times, from the beginning, before the earth began. I was born when there were no watery depths and no springs filled with water. Before the mountains were established, prior to the hills, I was given birth. Before he made the land, the fields, or the first soil on earth, I was there when he established the heavens, when he laid out the horizon on the surface of the ocean, when he placed the skies above, when the fountains of the ocean gushed out, when he set a limit for the sea so that the waters would not violate his command, when he laid out the foundations of the earth. I was a skilled craftsman beside him. I was his delight every day, always rejoicing before him. I was rejoicing in his inhabited world, delighting in the children of Adam. Say this very briefly, and then we'll give thought here. Sometimes some have tried to take this and equate this to be Jesus Christ. A lot of issues with that, considering the way the language is formed here, of it being born and given birth and all these things. So probably pull back from that. But let's notice here what's going on with this language. Wisdom has her origin before ancient times, and her source is none other than God himself. We could say it this way: God made wisdom to be his skilled craftsman in the work of creation. So who better to listen to about how life in this world works best than the one who stood at God's side, if we can picture it that way, and assisted him in crafting and creating this whole world. This is my Father's world, and he made it with great wisdom, with great skill. And now this embodiment of wisdom says, I'm available to you. I stood with him at the very beginning of time and creation. Lady Wisdom is not offering some recently released publication, some published version of a podcast conversation that explores some aspect of life in a little bit of depth. She's not offering that. She's offering a lifetime of skilled experience that started when there was nothing. Lady Wisdom knows how to make life out of nothing, and now she invites us to listen to her. Wisdom has been described as the skill of living God's way in God's world. I hope this text tonight commends wisdom to our souls. My desire is that this invitation, listen, take my advice, elevates in our own hearts and minds. And if you know Jesus Christ as your Savior, let me say it this way: you should know something rising inside you as you hear this wisdom commended, brought to us. Here it is. This is what assisted God at the creation of the world. This is what Christ himself used to make and form all things. There should be something that rises in the heart of every saint that goes, oh, I want that. Oh, I need that. This is the wisdom Jesus himself possessed, both at creation and at his incarnation. This is the wisdom Jesus himself grew into, according to Luke 2:40 and 52. Those passages at the end of his birth story where it says he grew in wisdom and stature. He grew in wisdom. This is the wisdom we must ask for from God, who gives generously and ungrudgingly, according to James. So listen to her words. Lean on her experience. Look at her age. And as you do, ask the Lord to help you accept her invitation to listen to her instruction and not ignore it. To watch and wait by her door every day. That language is so picturesque of someone just standing at the door. Maybe we think of it like this individual standing and waiting at the door for someone to come, and they know they're there, and they're just waiting for the door to open because they want to talk and they want to see and they want to engage in this with this person. To find her, and in finding her, find life and favor from none other than the Lord himself. Think of that. The promise here is, find me, and you find life and favor from Yahweh, from Jehovah. That's a big promise. That's a promise to go into the new year with and hold on to with joy and delight. We have the ability to have the wisdom that God himself possessed when he made the world. And by God's grace, let us be diligent to seek that out, to love it, and to find it. We're going to close tonight with the doxology and ask you to stand to close with that, and then we will be dismissed. After we sing that together, will be our closing prayer. Hope you get a chance to chat with Rob and Cindy before they head out tonight. Let's go ahead and close together with the doxology.